So today I'm going to talk a little bit about syndication, specifically why it is that syndicated television repeats never seem to air in the same order, particularly where there's a cliffhanger, which can be extremely frustrating. And there are a lot of well, actually, there's not a lot of videos. That's half the problem. There's a couple of videos on YouTube and some description on the internet that describes how television syndication works, and they're pretty vague. And the reason for that is because, frankly, the people that are doing these videos don't know what they're talking about, which sounds really mean, but I'm not actually criticizing. It has nothing to do with the overall intelligence of anybody that's doing these videos. It's just that they don't work in television, so they'll read a little bit about it and they're educating themselves about it, which is good, but they don't work in it, so they don't really understand exactly how it works. So they're just kind of parroting what they've read, which is okay. But it doesn't help anybody that really wants to know how this stuff works. So what are my qualifications? I am actually a television syndicator. I have a television program that is on the air in US syndication called Go Nitro, and it runs on ABC, CBS, NBC, CW, and Fox stations across the United States. So I have a pretty good background of how this works because that's largely how I make my living. So in order for us to understand why it is that there are repeats, we first need to understand the three forms of syndication in regard to how basically we as television producers that do syndicated programming get paid. So the three types of syndicated programming in terms of how we get paid are a straight out license fee. And a straight out license fee is exactly what it sounds like. Basically, we get paid by the individual TV station for the right to air our TV show for a period of time. I jokingly refer to it as an extra strength rental because that's kind of what it is. It's like Netflix or Blockbuster, where you're basically renting the right to view a program for a certain period of time. In this case, it's usually a season or a couple of seasons, or sometimes it's a one-off. It depends on the type of program. But as a consequence of that, we don't actually get any advertising money from it. Now, ironically, this type of deal is the most likely one where you will actually not see any breaks or anything airing out of order. The reason for this is there's no reason to, right? Because the television station does not have any stake really in how it airs. They just want to make sure that they have the right to air it. And so there's no restrictions as to how they run the show or when it airs or anything like that. And that's just a straight, full-on license fee. We get paid. We don't get any money from the commercials. We just get paid from the TV station. The show airs, and that's it. The second two types of syndication are the types where you're more likely to see things that are disjointed in the sense that they don't air in sequence. And I'm actually going to go with the most likely one. So the two other ways, as I've indicated, than the first one that I'd already described, are partial barter with cash and no cash, all barter. Now, there's a couple of ways we can get paid. Obviously, the simplest way would be able to get a fee from the TV station, and then you would basically just air your program. But that's not always the best way to do it, and it's not always the way that you'll make the most money or even be the most efficient way of doing it. So, for example, Go Nitro airs on a barter basis. And what that means is that instead of charging a fee for the television show itself, we actually ask for control of the commercials in the program itself. Because a lot of the times we can actually make more money on the commercial placement than we actually would with the fees that we would get for the television station itself. So it makes more sense for us to do it that way. The problem is, depending on the type of company you are, you have to already have those connections or be able to sell that advertising. And some companies aren't really all that good at that, or they don't have the connections. My company that I own also has an advertising agency division, so we can sell commercials to people that are already our clients. So it's fairly straightforward for us to kind of fill those advertising spots, and we can make more money that way. However, This is where the frustrating, disjointed, doesn't air in order repeat thing tends to come into play. When you have an advertising supported show and you're in control of the advertising, it's a basic tenet of business that whoever pays the most generally gets the most control. So what that means is that when we have certain advertisers, they generally have certain things that they're expecting in return for advertising on the show. Now, that could mean time slot. They might want a better time slot. They might want a particular episode. There's a whole slew of things that the advertiser might want in exchange for the larger amount of money that they're being paid. And as a consequence of that, they also have a list of episodes in a particular show, and they can cherry pick which ones they most likely want to advertise in. And the ones that pay the most and have the most advertising slots are honestly the ones that you're going to see the most frequently. So when you see a show that does not air in order, the most likely cause is that the advertiser wants to have their advertising seen in particular episodes, and because they're the ones paying, they're the ones that get to decide. And we, in turn, then provide a running order to the television station. Now, some television stations run it all on their own if they're not given a run sheet, but generally speaking, they're actually given a run sheet that dictates when each episode is supposed to run and in what sequence it's run in. And it looks a little bit like this. This is an actual run sheet for Go Nitro. So this is actually the sheet of paper that the television stations see that we send them that says, here's all the episodes of Go Nitro that we want to run. These are which ones are supposed to run, when they're supposed to run, and what week. And that is actually what dictates when the show runs, because the TV stations want that. Sometimes there are some episodes it doesn't matter, but generally we are expected to provide a run sheet. We actually have to tell the television stations when we generally want each individual show to air. And so really it comes down to the advertisers. So if we have an advertiser that's paying a good amount of money for a particular episode and they want more front loaded for certain episodes, those are the ones that we are going to run in order to keep the advertiser happy. That's the long and the short of it. The second reason is sometimes it doesn't really matter when it airs. It just basically, there's so many episodes and there isn't an aggregate number or basically a list that the television station has to have. Sometimes we just give the television station carte blanche to decide when they want to run it, depending on the type of show it is. Some shows have so many episodes and have been on the air for such a long time that realistically, there just isn't time for the guys that work at the television station and gals to go through every single episode and make sure that they're not breaking something off. Because you got to remember that the master control people that are basically scheduling the shows and slots at the individual stations, it's not just that one show that they're scheduling. They have to schedule everything in every time slot every single day. So they just don't have the time to go through 300, 400, 500 episodes of The Big Bang Theory or Frasier or Everybody Loves Raymond or whatever and make sure that it's not a cliffhanger. Because in all likelihood, most of the episodes that do run in syndication generally don't run in two parts. And when they do, it's an exception rather than a regular occurrence. So when these shows are programmed, they're basically just programmed as efficiently as possible. That's the other second likely scenario. But generally speaking, if it's running out of order, it's because the advertiser is paying for either a particular placement or a particular time slot, and that dictates what show is going to run and is prioritized in when it airs accordingly. The other thing that we have to understand about it is it's a little bit of an art, but as a general rule, syndication, and a lot of programmers don't want to admit this, that producers, programmers, and people that make the shows, with myself included, is that syndicated shows generally are used as filler. They might not be presented as if they're used as filler, but they're generally shows that are meant to fill up a time slot. Now, you could say, well, aren't all shows used to fill up a time slot? Well, no, prime time is a prestige time slot, and generally that's when you get the first run of major shows. But the thing is you can't have a prime time slot populate an entire schedule. So your prime time slots are for shows that are new and are hip or whatever you want to call it, and don't have enough bulk of episodes to run in syndication, but they're still new and they still have value because they still have the public's attention. But once you start getting to a certain amount of episodes, they can be run again and again and again, or rerun. Basically, that's obviously what a rerun is. And that's effectively what syndicated programming is. Syndicated programming is really designed to fill a time slot. Everything outside of the prime time schedule, which is basically everything, has to be filled generally with programming of some kind, whether it be syndicated programming or whether it be live programming or sports or even paid programming if they're trying to basically sell you a chocolate-covered double-dong dildo at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's all stuff that has to fill the time in the slot. So you got to understand that syndicated programming, from a television programmer's point of view, is basically filler. So they have a lot of slots that they have to fill, and that's really the first consideration that they have when they decide what's going to run. But in a nutshell, that's basically why you see repeats, because the advertisers are paying for a particular placement at a particular time. And so those episodes that they want to have their slot in generally dictates what the running order is going to be.